Billy Meyer is a now 86-year-old Swiss man. He speaks a little English, but he no longer does interviews, so that's what I volunteered to do. He began, according to him, his contacts with an extraterrestrial man, 1942, when he was 5 years old, actually. His is the most documented life I know of. We have photographs going back to the age of 5 and all the way along the way. Somebody knew at that time, in 1942 in Switzerland, that it was going to be important to get photographic and other documentation on this man, who is today and has been since then the only actual extraterrestrial contactee, the only person with actual evidence, independently authenticated, analyzed and authenticated, of extraterrestrial manufacture. None of the hearings, none of the people making claims today have that. Only fuzzy videos and this and that. This is the hard evidence. 1,200 plus photos in this period of time from about 1964 onward to 1981, over 1,200 photos, 8 films, a video in which he appears while he is in broad daylight videotaping a UFO hovering at a tree, and he zooms in. It's just the most amazing documentation. People can't handle it. Say it's too good to be true. It had to be a fake. But as you know, the late astronaut Gordon Cooper says, in 35 seconds, these photos are authentic. They're fine, very fine. He's meeting with extraterrestrials, and I don't know why anybody calls this man a hoaxer. It's the real thing. And it goes on and on. So he's somebody who, going back quite a way, has had an extraordinary life. There have been 25 attempts on his life, as you say. There are 120 eyewitnesses. I am one of them. I've been within 20 feet. I've had 3 sightings of their craft. One was within 20 feet of him. That I consider still anecdotal. The hard evidence, the UFO photos, films, independently authenticated. Nobody has it. Nobody. But this is a higher standard of proof. Billy Meyer is shown, and in some cases just conversationally informed about things. He doesn't have to see everything for himself. He publishes it. And they do it because they have these alleged extraterrestrial human beings who are called the Plejaren, otherwise known in the fake UFO circles as Pleiadians. No such people exist. They feel a self-obligated mission to try to help us assure our own future survival. That goes back eons to when, according to the information of the case, their forefathers were among those who messed around a little bit with primitive Earth peoples at different epochs and misled people, represented themselves, as did other ETs, as the gods of our religions, and set things in motion that have caused a great deal of confusion and pain to humankind. Not the people that he's meeting with today, and he's met with them as recently as last week, but their forefathers, their ancestors. He's already published over 870 transcripts of these meetings with them, and there's others that have yet to be published, full of information, full of the warnings about what's coming, what can be avoided, and what probably can't.
But is there any other big ones that stand out to you that is just like jaw-dropping that you would want to share with our audience?
Certainly in this 87 document that we can absolutely, prove, I think we're maybe coming to it, the destruction of humankind by AI. The danger of AI. Yeah.
Artificial intelligence, he gets this prediction from Contact in 1987, publishes that AI is going to lead to our destruction.
Computer-controlled weapons. He also mentions cloned human fighting machines. So this is 1987. We don't know anything about AI. And the computer-controlled weapons turn against humankind, and it's going to be we could see it now if we had half a brain. No, but, the cat's out of the bag, and all the techno heads who can't just wait to merge with machines. They haven't become human beings yet, but they want to merge with machines. So we can just watch these things. We are posting all the time the updates on which volcano has erupted, which new correlation or corroboration of Meyer's info. All of this talk about evil alien threat, which we know is bogus because no advanced space traveling enemy is going to wait 70 years until you've got some kind of weaponry, nuclear and all the rest of it, to attack if that was its intention. But we're told that there's this evil alien threat. However, in 2015, in a video with English subtitles, and some of it Meyer tells in English, before this Tic Tac video ever comes up, Meyer explains what these other UFO sightings, majority of sightings have been from secret military craft since after World War II. But the ones that aren't, and the ones that are not from these people that Meyer meets with, they're from other beings who have been here a very long time, who are based underneath the ground, you could say the seas.
So Italy volcanoes, he predicts this back in the 1940s. He gets this message about, yeah, and now it's active.
And there's more. Yeah, because subsequent to that in the 70s, he was told that Vesuvius, when Vesuvius erupts, it's going to take out the Vatican. And the skeptics jumped on that and they said, what an idiot. We all know that, Vesuvius, that's near Naples, and the Vatican's over here in Rome.
Rome, right, yeah.
Right? Within the last 10 years, scientists discovered that the magma chambers for Vesuvius extend all the way under Rome.
Oh my
The magma
gosh.
chambers are right under there. And then there was venting taking place at the Rome airport, where I think this is in the last 4 or 5 years, where people were noticing steam coming up at the airport. People, maybe we want to stop chasing lights in the sky and get down to taking care of ourselves.
Let's also talk about 2 coming U.S. civil wars. Now, when did Billy, what specifically did Billy learn during a contact session about U.S. civil wars? When was that, and what did they say?
In 1981 and in 1987, I may have touched on that, this document called the Henoch Prophecies. Henoch is the German word for Enoch. Enoch, the prophet Enoch, just like Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and a couple others, was a contactee for these people as well. And they were shown, some of these people also were time traveled, if you would, they could show them that, and at those times, of course, there was no United States of America and countries named Russia. Enoch really is about 10,000 years ago. But in those prophecies from him, it was stated, in future times, the United States of America will have 2 terrible civil wars, one following upon the other, and it can't be helped that the country will break up into 4 or 5 territories. As I said, I read that in 1986. I was in an apartment on Westwood Boulevard in Los Angeles with a guy named Randy Winters, who used to speak about this material. He was a very great speaker about it. And I laughed and I said to Randy, I said, what is this Swiss guy smoking? What do you mean civil wars in America? He says, well, Billy, he's been pretty right about everything. I said, well, I don't see civil war. I was laughing, and I'm not laughing now, and a lot of people aren't.
The Apophis asteroid in 2029 or 2036. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Or 2029 or 2036, an asteroid is going to do what?
In 1981, and we illustrated this in a comic book, we illustrated a couple of Billy's important context so people could see it and read it, and maybe it'll go in. He, in 1981, and then again a couple of years later, further elaborated on the coming of an object that he and the Playaran people referred to as the red meteor, that our scientists would then call asteroid Apophis. And as people can read and or see illustrated in 6 languages, this is an object coming from the depths of outer space that is on a collision course with Earth, either on 2029. If it misses, it comes back 2036 and hits. The Playaran people are not allowed to mess with this, if we may use that word, but they specifically state in this information, your scientists worldwide need to come together to deflect, not blow up, but deflect this object. Because if you try to blow it up, it's going to rain down on your planet. That's not a good idea. What's the best way to do it? The detonation of an atomic charge from a missile within a certain vicinity that your scientists can figure out enough of a shock wave to go, because that little is going to go in terms of the actual distance by which it'll miss your world. Now, after we publish that information, and I first got the information to publish on this, I think it was in the 2000s, but it's in the 1981 information. I don't know if I ever noticed it before. Um, the Russians then called for an international effort to deflect Apophis. The Chinese, I think, signed on to that. The European Space Agency was invited. NASA poo-pooed the whole thing, and then NASA had to go and change a size estimate. We have all this. They changed the size estimate of this object based on their abilities to see this thing to within, I think it's 25 meters of what Meyer was given,
Wow. Whoa, whoa,
1981.
whoa. So Meyer was given
Yeah.
the size of this object
Yes.
and when it's
Yes.
going to hit, and then
Yes.
they discover it years
And
later.
where?
And where? Holy,
Yes.
holy
And
shit!
that is, and of course, that's going to, according to this information. And again, ladies and gentlemen, people, make of it what you will. NASA has continuously tried to, poo-poo the whole thing. The Pleiaren have said if this strikes on either of those dates, it will strike between the North Sea and the Black Sea. It will rip, the surface of the Earth open there. There will be, of course, tidal waves and floods and what have you, and gases that will be released, the atmospheric consequences, the nuclear power plants that are on various fault lines and seashores, and the cause and effect of this whole thing would be massive. And so far, there's been no real action. Now, NASA recently, I think, was talking about solar sails or this, that, which the Pleiaren also had said, don't bother with that. You need to deflect it. Now, the problem is, if I recall correctly, and I may not, that the US is not allowed to put any nuclear weapons in space, but that Russia is not under that limitation. And cooperation rather than, insane war just for the illusion of being able to rule a cinder block here, it'd be wise for our leaders to heed this information and go ahead and, if you can, try to discredit. Don't try to keep killing the man. Don't do that. Just discredit his information, because every time all these assassination attempts tell you, hey, this guy is the real deal. He's a threat. And without saying too much, I can tell you right now that I know for a fact that their property in Switzerland is under regular military, we'll call it monitoring for a polite term, and presence, because they are trying to intercept the messages from the meetings that Meyer has with these people, which they can't do. And it's not, listen, this isn't like I'm a UFO contactee. This is a thankless gig for the most part. Each time a major prophet came forward in our history, they were not welcomed. They were nailed up or hacked to pieces or whatever.
Right.
So we're being warned that we, the people of Earth, heed that first, law of the universe. If you want, you're responsible for your life, for your planet, for yourselves.
44 specific error-free predictions regarding COVID and the vaccine dating back to 1947. So he was being told in 1947 about a pandemic to come and about COVID or a specific version of this. Can you talk about that one?
Right. I can. And I'm going to tell you right now that we have the documents online, the transcripts from 1947, 49, when young 10 and 12-year-old Edward Albert Meyer is describing what's coming, all sorts of things, including the problems women would have, the toxicity from vaccines, but most importantly, for proof positive, February 23rd, 2020, I received a document. It had a dozen specific warnings. You see the document, dozen specific warnings about this coming pandemic. We are the first people in English to not theorize, but to publish the fact that this was to be a pandemic. It would effectively be spread by a lot of asymptomatic spreaders. Children would be the first hidden spreaders. The WHO would be, and China would be largely responsible, a bunch of things, and an interesting recommendation in there about the need for hermetically sealed environments. So people who look at that and read it, let me now explain. I published that documentation 2 days later. I read through it, and that was on February 25th, 2020, I believe. Everything in that document there, that's a dozen, there are over 40 more specific examples of the information, and Meyer published it. We can prove all of that. And he published it before anybody else, CDC, WHO. For the trouble of sending this around through the state in which I live, Arizona, when there were 5 cases in the state on March 2nd, we had zero coverage. We were told it would not be published, it would not be investigated, and now we have, I don't know, 37,000
Wow.
cases. It goes.
So you published it. Yeah, you published it on your website. This information coming from Meyer saying that this was coming, and before anyone was talking about it. The Jupiter IO information. I'm fascinated about this. In 1978, can you explain the Voyager missions in 1978 or the Jupiter IO information in 1978? What is this about?
The Jupiter mission was in process in 78. It would end up taking some very important photographs in 1979 of and around Jupiter and its moons. It's somewhere around October, maybe 15th or 18th of 1978, Billy Meyer publishes a transcript in one of those bound early published books. We have it, we've got the dates, and I'll be able to show everybody. He is discussing with an alleged extraterrestrial woman Jupiter and its moon Io. And he states, as I recall, Io, you told me, is the most volcanically active body in the solar system. And the ejecta from its volcanoes, that part of the ejecta that escapes the gravitational pull of that moon, is taken up into the torus around Jupiter. The rest of it falls down onto the moon, and it accounts for the unnaturally smooth surface of a moon. And it goes on and on about this thing, and goes on to more information about Jupiter. Well, I believe, and I use that word because I want to make sure that, okay, I'm pretty sure March 12th, 1979, JPL NASA announces the single most important discovery of the Voyager mission, and that is that Io is the most volcanically active body in the solar system. How could Billy Meyer in 1978, and this information is carried to the U.S., by the way, by Lieutenant Colonel Wendell Stevens. He reports, I've had this information in my possession since, he says, since March 9th, 3 days before NASA makes the announcement.
Wow.
How could he know and describe a moon of a planet that he doesn't have nobody had a telescope to see that stuff.
Right.
It's just one. So how does he, and it turns out skeptics jumped on this to attack it, and they started posting articles about the Jupiter mission and all of this. And a year later, JPL NASA comes out with another finding which corroborates the 1978 information. The skeptics inadvertently support and publish post Meyer information that corroborates it. This one thing alone. This is ironclad. We've got this.
Right.
And so I do get excited about that one.
Details about Mars, the black holes, 1976 through 1988. Can you talk about Mars and black holes? And when did he predict this, and when was it discovered?
Well, okay, I'm not looking at all my documentation here, but 1976, he starts to publish information when he's meeting with his third contact person, a woman named Semyaze. And she's explaining to him that, because he's asking about life on Mars, and she says, there's no life on Mars as your scientists perceive it, but there is a microbial, floric and faunic form of life on Mars that will be discovered. That the environment, though, on Mars is hostile to life, and I'm giving these for a certain reason. And then she goes into, as do several other of the Mars ones, the water on Mars, that the fact that there's far more than is known, where it's located on Mars, which direction it's flowing in, et cetera, et cetera. So it turns out that in, I think, the corroboration on the Mars, it wasn't until 1987 on that they start to corroborate information about Mars. Mars does have, as was discovered, I think, during this century, it does have small floric and faunic life forms that are not yet considered by us, life, like people are thinking, oh, there's people on Mars or what have you. No. And it has something called perchlorate in the soil, which is a toxic substance which is hostile to life. That's on Mars. The other information, I have 3 pages of this, and we'll get to the black hole part of this too, because I could just lump it in and say all the documentation that people can see, and there's tons more on the website on black holes. Meyer verifiably published that for official discovery. Now, I brought 3 pages of this information to a man named Ken Herkenhoff at the USGS in Flagstaff, Arizona, October of 2020, I believe it was. I gave him these 3 pages and I said, tell me what you think. He's a very, very nice guy, by the way. Gets back to me saying, could this guy be making lucky guesses? I said, I don't think so, Ken. I've got 3 pages of stuff about Mars you didn't know anything about. He said, well, what about lightning on Mars? I've never heard about that because Meyer published about lightning on Mars back in 80 or 82 or so. So Ken Herkenhoff couldn't find it, but NASA put it up in 2009.
So they discovered lightning 20 years later after he published
yes.
it. Wow.
Yes. It goes on and on like this. And with black holes, they're still discovering information that we have verifiably published before these discoveries.